natural gas. And because of this, we are seeing huge distortion and we are not being able to replace coal with cleaner fuels. Similarly, we tax the bus higher than the car. Okay? I mean, so all this...
So whole mindset, as you said, mindset.
And this budget, very categorically, there's a line saying that the budget is going to promote construction, control of construction and demolition waste. Damn, very good. But one of the critical strategy of C&D waste is to recycle the C&D and bring that product, recycled product back into construction.
Exactly.
But we know that under GST, the recycled C&D product is taxed higher than the standard material. So therefore, you need an absolute cleaning up of the fiscal regime.
Absolutely, I think.
What I try to do with these murals is like try to say something so it sparks conversation. But at the same time, through those conversations, we could do something.
Graffiti itself is something that's typically frowned upon and viewed as illegal, but graffiti, it's an art form, does have a lot of power when used in a positive manner.
Murals are a way to ensure that there's a larger diversity of voices that are present in our public streets. One of the things that attracted me to mural painting was the way that it allowed me to use my voice in the public realm and to start conversations with people that I wouldn't normally cross paths with. So even in the process of painting this mural, I had a chance to meet so many amazing people in the neighborhood and get to know a lot more of my neighbors, and especially during a time when people are feeling so isolated, having an opportunity to connect with people around a message of positivity.
Welcome to South Asian Environment Dialogue. This is a program where we, for the last 5 months or so, we are discussing various facets of climate change and environment in this part of the world. And as South Asia is a critical part of the world, so we are actually discussing the global issues on environment and climate change. And today we'll be again discussing another very critical issues. Before introducing the subject, let me share with you that you all know, but still share with you that this is now perhaps the one and only of its kind program in South Asia talking about environment and climate change. Is brought on by the Canadian television channel Climate Channel in association with the Indian media platform, the Plurals, and also notvbangla, a Bangladeshi YouTube channel. Now today, we are going to discuss climate change, big threat, little money. This is an issue being so often being discussed across the table. And today we are also going to discuss that. Before coming into the issue and introducing the subject for you, let me introduce a very, very eminent panel that we have with us today. Let me start with Nilanjan Ghosh, Dr. Nilanjan Ghosh. Nilanjan Ghosh is the director of Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata, a major think tank of South Asia, and he works in various areas, but one of the major area of work is ecological economics. And I really privileged to have Nilanjan in this today's show. Welcome, Nilanjan, to the show.
Pleasure indeed.
Thank you. I have with me Anumita RoyChowdhury. Anumita is the Executive Director of Center for Science and Environment, CSE, one of the, I think, the global major on this kind of environment and climate issues. And she is working on the air pollution sector and also the related sectors, not only in India, but across, I think, in other parts of South Asia and also in Africa as well. So Anumita, it's such a privilege to have you again in this show. And we are really would like to know from you that what's happening in this budget and how this budget is impacting or is going to impact the future of India. Welcome, Anumita.
Greetings to everyone. Very happy to be here.
Thank you. We have with us Professor Qazi Kholiquzzaman Ahmad. He's the chairman, Dhaka School of Economics, University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, and is one of the major, I think, the expert in this region talking about climate change, particularly the financial part of it. And it's such another privilege to have you, Professor Ahmed, and we are really keen to know what's happening in South Asia, and especially in Bangladesh, from you on this area of kind of climate finance or the kind of related issues like that. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and hello to everybody.
Thank you. And finally, but last but not the least, very importantly, Ms. Khadeeja Naseem. She is the Deputy Minister of Environment, Maldives, and also a very eminent expert on climate finance. So such a welcome kind of, I think, attributes, a politician coupled with the expertise on ground. And very rarely we do find that, and such a privilege to host you in this today's program, madam. We are really keen to know what's happening in Maldives. Only we talk about Maldives in terms of tourism, that's very important, but climate change wise, Maldives is extremely threatened. So really would like to know from you how the things are going out in Maldives. Welcome to the show. So that's the panel for me today. Before I go over, I'll start with, because the Indian budget has recently been announced. And as I said, today we are going to talk about the budgetary allocations and the related issues on environment, climate change, and also the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals in this region. We often talk about that the bigger countries are not giving money to us, but are we actually giving money ourselves to these issues? That's very important question to understand and I think track. Before I go over to first Nilanjan and then Anumita to talk about the Indian budget and what they think about it, let me share with you that in this year Indian budget, in all, around 3,000 crores being allotted to the Environment Ministry, which is even less than 1%. And that money has gone down compared to the last year. Now, many may say that in the aftermath of COVID, it is what was always expected on the line. But still, how can you explain only 30 crores being allotted to climate action plan this year? And if you say that, okay, COVID was the reason, I will counter saying that last year when there was no COVID, it was 40 crores. So no big deal about that. So from that on, let me go to Nilanjan. Nilanjan, how you see this budget, especially from the environment and climate change point of view?
In fact, prior to coming to this, let me first thank you for inviting me, and also it's indeed a privilege for me to be among a group of panelists, which it's an August gathering. In fact, so thanks a lot to South Asian Environment Dialogue and to you, Mr. Basu. But before I get into the budget, in fact, what I also felt at times is that there is a complete disassociation in some way or the other as far as we look at our development paradigm. Somehow climate or climate action has not been thought of as an integral component of our development paradigm. And this comes up again and again whenever any type of comment or remark comes out, or any kind of response comes out from the finance ministry, or suppose say from our planning agencies like Niti Aayog. Now, as an economist, if I look at climate change, I look at it as a cost, purely as a cost. Now, cost to whom? Of course, there have been a host of measures which have come out ever since the Stern assessment way back in 2005-06 at the beginning of the millennium, that in terms of cost to the GDP, true, fine. But what happens is, what we often miss out, and this never appears in any kind of global assessments or the global dialogues, the cost that essentially climate change imposes on the poor in the form of losses to the ecosystem services. Because in all ways, one has to remember one thing, that there is an inequitable distribution of the impacts of climate change as far as the rich and the poor are concerned.
Yes.
One of the very critical things in here is that when we look at climate change, when we look at ecosystem services, of course, one very critical element is that the land loss is happening. In fact, we are witnessing sea level rise because of global warming. And on the other hand, we are losing out on the very, very critical supporting services, regulating services, and eventually the provisioning services of the ecosystem on which the poor are directly reliant on. So, one very critical element that comes to my mind in here is that, which Pawan Sukhdev mentioned, in fact, in 2009 in his paper in Nature, that these ecosystem services are nothing but GDP of the poor. In fact, this has come out in my assessments as well when I looked at the ecosystem dependency index, ecosystem dependencies of the poor. What I found is that they extract more from the ecosystem than what they get from the economic activity, from the economy as such. So suppose, say, if the poor is getting 100 rupees from the economy, through some kind of an economic endeavor, he is possibly drawing at times 120 rupees from the ecosystem when we put across a monetary value to these ecosystem services. So when you lose out on these ecosystem services because of the forces of climate change, essentially you are hitting on the GDP of the poor.
So you feel that this trend has continued in this last budget?
It is actually continuing. And as far as this last budget is concerned, you're absolutely right. In the budget speech, if you recall, there was no statement on climate change, despite the fact, if you look at the 6 pillars, except for the pillar on governance, where essentially FM uses the term minimum government, maximum governance.
Governance, yes.
Except for this 6th pillar, all the 5 pillars are embedded in the SDGs. You talk of physical capital, you talk of health, you talk of education, sure. But what is being critically missed out is that one wave of the ocean is going to wipe out your physical capital.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It is going to wipe out your development.
And you are not acknowledging it.
You are not acknowledging it. And that is why if you look at the SDGs, climate action is one of the SDGs. So if you one very critical element, if you look at SDGs, is that it embeds 4 capitals very critically. One is the natural capital, the physical capital, the social capital, and human capital. And at the same time, it talks of climate action. Why? So that it enables the movement of these 4 capitals.
Without that critical cog, the whole thing goes missing. Absolutely, Nilanjan. I think that's a very important part. I'll come back to you, but let's go to Anumita. Anumita, let's be a devil's advocate. All said and done, some amount has been allotted to air pollution in 42 cities, though the amount has been halved compared to last year. And we really do not know how the amount was spent last year in the first place. There was some amount on the renewable energy, but very kind of I think pockets of release like that. So how you perceive as a practicing environmentalist, how you see this budget, Anumita?
Absolutely. So Jayanta, first, I mean, congratulations to you for putting this platform together for this very critical conversation. And as Nilanjan has already put the big context, the big picture, on the table, and that clearly gives us the whole reason to, that why we now need to look at green budgeting, the reason for that. So to answer your question, let's first keep one point in mind, that this is actually the first budget after the unprecedented economic shock that we have experienced due to the pandemic. This is also the first budget of this decade which is now looking for transformational changes, right? Now, at the same time, this budget has come at a time when, during the pandemic, the lockdown, and all the economic recovery packages that we have got, at the same time, we have also seen lowering of environmental safeguards. Several environmental regulations were weakened, right? Now, that's the context of this budget this year. And clearly, the expectation that we had, that while certainly we need a budget for economic recovery, but it had to be green recovery. And that's the lesson that we have been learning from across the regions. Everywhere, we are finding that while the governments are giving economic recovery, designing economic recovery packages, they're also making it conditional with social and environmental conditions attached to that. So that was the expectation. Now, from that perspective, what are the hits and what are the misses in this budget? That's what we really want to understand. So what have we got? Yes, you are right. We have got a Clean Air Fund. And this is for the first time that started last year, that we have started to get dedicated funding for clean air action. But what we need to keep in mind that this new funding that has come, which started last year with the allocation of 4,400 crore in the last budget, that has got split into these two installments. So the last year we got half of that amount in November. It was too late, maybe because of all the pandemic, etc., that we understand. But therefore, at this moment, it's too early for us to say what happened because of that spending, because there is no review or anything available at this stage. And now the next half has come this year. Now, what this essentially means is that this money has come because of the 15th Finance Commission's recommendation for the urban local bodies. And this money was given to 42 cities, right, to do their work. Now, the split is that while the urban local bodies are getting this money to do the clean air action, but the 122 cities who are doing clean air action under the NCAP program, that program still remains grossly underfunded. And a very marginal increase in this budget. So clearly, now the next big question for us in the Clean Air Fund is that now we have to start talking about performance-based budget. Because every time when we look at any money that comes for clean air action and the action taken report that the cities file, that only talks about mechanical sweeping of roads, sprinklers. They do not talk about infrastructure, systemic changes, clean fuel, technology changes. And therefore the new money has to fix that. That's the first lesson. The second part of the budget is, yes, we have got stimulus package this year. One is a scrappage policy for old vehicles, but we do not know yet the fine prints of that scrappage policy. How effective that is going to be, we are waiting for that policy to come. Now, what we hear that this is voluntary and maybe there is no active incentive. Maybe the entire policy is based on only disincentive. So we do not know how many vehicles it will actually end up scrapping. So we do not know. The second is, which is very important, that was something we had really asked for, is a stimulus package for the public transport. So the buses and the other forms of public transport, which is important because that was literally decimated during the last year, during the pandemic. So that is good. And the final, now this is all about what we have got and also the waste management. That is a big chunk of money, and that is a huge co-benefit of clean air and climate. But what have we missed? The missing is, which Nilanjan also pointed out, that the climate change agenda, right, certainly has not been addressed, especially looking at it from the climate adaptation perspective. At least for mitigation, what has been given for clean air has a co-benefit for climate, but for adaptation, especially in our country, after all the devastating cyclones that we have seen, okay? So and the agricultural resilience that was required at this moment. So that agenda is missing. And the energy agenda, which is so important, especially renewable energy. Only thing that we have got is to reduce to increase the import duty on renewable energy technology so that we can do localization and do manufacturing. Now, this Atmanirbhar agenda is important, but without setting targets, when we know that India had set a target of 175 gigawatt of RE by 2021, but we have only been able to achieve 91 so far. And at the same time, we have increased our ambition to 450 gigawatt by...
Absolutely. Prime Minister announced it. Prime Minister announced it. No less than Prime Minister.
Where is the template and the blueprint to achieve that? So clearly what I'm saying is that just to end here right now, then I'll take up a lot more, that this budget, even though we have got some good, I will not deny that, there are certainly some good points, we have to leverage that, but it is still very focused on the immediate relief and survival. It is still not, ambitious enough to talk about creative way of achieving transformational changes.
Absolutely, and I think with also the ambition part is coming up so greatly in context to Glasgow later this year. And the entire world is talking about the increased ambition about cutting the kind of carbon emission. So I think it was expected that the Indian government would have perhaps invested more in that. We'll be discussing that, but let's go to Bangladesh because you mentioned adaptation, and that's the adaptation, I would say, the capital in the world. Professor Kholiquzzaman Saab, what your take? Because I am seeing the Bangladesh budget, it is around 7.5%, the last budget of yours. 7.5% of the budget was allotted to environment. So that's a good one. And in fact, I have seen that I think the experts, including you, have said it's a good budget from an environmental point of view, but we need to be honest with the spending. That's a very, very interesting operative word, honest with the spending. So how your take on the Bangladesh budget and its usage? Professor.
Thank you very much. I agree with the larger picture that has been given by two Indian speakers. Climate change is an existential threat to humanity and even the globe itself. So that has to be kept in perspective when we discuss climate change and environment also. Now, Bangladesh is at the forefront, as you know, of the climate change impact, and it has been said that the poor are affected most. And therefore, the government and international community, they don't feel it immediately. That's not immediate for them. But for the poor people, it is immediate, but they can't articulate and can't reach the government. So this disconnect is there. Therefore, you find actions which are not adequate or not quite relevant. That has happened. No, but in Bangladesh, of course, we are fortunate in the sense that we had this Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan that was prepared in 2009. It is now being revised, I should say. There is a draft which will be finalized very soon. And we have 6 pillars under it. And the 6 pillars are food security that has to be ensured, and then infrastructure, then mitigation, of course, we have that as well, and low carbon development, disaster management, capacity building, and research and knowledge management. These are the 6 heads under which we discuss our policies and also action programs. Now we have an allocation this year of 24,226 crore taka,
yes, that's
which is 2.9 billion US dollars this year, and it has been distributed across these 6 pillars, as I said, and 25 ministries are involved. In addition, there is a climate change trust fund in which every year some money is put. And this year it's about 24 million US dollars equivalent, 200 crore taka. So we have that. In addition, there are other projects where there is a climate component. So I don't know the exact amount. Nobody knows actually. That's a matter of research. So it will be about 4.5 billion US dollars on climate. But the problem, as you said, that the spending of it, sometimes in Bangladesh, we have the goal set, we have the program, but somehow in implementation, we don't get the results that we in fact aimed for. It's not necessarily corruption, but it's inaction that may also be considered as one kind of corruption. But there are projects which have been implemented very well as well. So it's not all black or all white.
Exactly so.
It's a mixed bag, and it's everywhere in the world. All around the world, I think that happens. No country in the world is very clean on not only climate change, but on other actions. So we have good budget, as you say, mentioned. But one of the things that we are now struggling with is prioritization. Is which action first and which action next? That's one of the problems here. So we have.
In fact, I'll be coming to that, because privatization and along with that, this huge, because Bangladesh is increasing economically very rapidly. And whether are you compromising with the environmental agendas down the line, that's very interesting to know from you. I'll be coming to you on that. But let me go to first Ms. Khadeeja, the Deputy Minister in Maldives. Madam, your situation is different. Your threat of climate change is definitely in all the countries also there, but you're just a smaller country. And how you see, because you are a politician, among this whole group, you are the only one who's a practicing politician. So you have to balance and juggle between your concern as an environmentalist and also your kind of responsibilities and role as a politician. So how you see that? But very interesting to note on the outset, let me share with the audience that in Maldives, the budget for environment is bigger than the budget of defense. That is something I really feel an extremely positive thing. Let go over to Madam Khadeeja for your comment, please.
Thank you, and thank you for having me for this important discussion. So first, I would like to say that the Maldives, our new government was not so new. Now it's been 2 years since we came into the government, and we have recently set the new ambitious national strategies and action plans to address climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. So the president has announced our aim to reach net zero by 2030, which is a very ambitious goal for a small country like us. And the point of it is not that we of course need intense amount of resources and aid and help from all of our partners and our friends. But the point is that we want to make sure that we reflect this kind of climate change thinking in all of our sectors. So it does not only concern the Environment Ministry. So the Environment Ministry's budget is about 5% of our total budget, and it is bigger than the defense budget, because climate change and the environmental sector is very important. But I would also like to say that if you look at some other panelists also highlighted the adaptation side of things, a lot of the infrastructure projects, a lot of the hard engineering projects by the government, these are all could be counted as adaptation, because this includes things like coastal protection, building of harbors, building of new ports, and making more consolidated urban living spaces, connecting different islands through better transportation. Things like this is supposed to increase the resilience of the community. So this another way of looking at the budget could actually say that we are putting our money into mainstreaming climate change, and one thing that the Ministry of Finance has begun working on is creating a national financing framework and institutional setup, because, as you know, we are also a SIDS country, and we do not have very good systems in place still. We are working on it, so we want to make sure that we have better coordination between the ministries and between our donors, and also that we don't lose funds doing the same projects or double counting, and we ensure that our money is not lost on things like corruption. On this note, I'd also like to highlight that the Maldives had been ranked better in Transparency International's CPI, this year. So we have jumped 14 places, I believe. And so we still have a long way to go in gaining more public confidence in the way that we are spending our national budget. But I believe that we're making the small steps to go towards a cleaner, more environmentally friendly future, while I also acknowledge we still have a lot of room for improvement and a lot of work to be done. But from the politics aspect, I would like to say that we have our willpower in the right direction, and now we have to materialize our goals. And of course, people might think that, oh, achieving net zero is like really far-fetched, and or there's always going to be corruption, there's always going to be money.
Absolutely,
you know,
absolutely.
Correctly, but I think that the first step by a government in changing the direction into the right manner is a big achievement. So,
and I think, Madam, what helps Maldives is the major livelihoods and the major professions, number of major professions, maybe fishery, maybe tourism. They are like those which do not really impact the environment per se. That might be an additional advantage for Maldives, country like Maldives, because you are kind of having those kind of issues there. So it's great to hear from you that government is going in the right direction. As you said, will be speeding up in future, and with Glasgow coming up, we all expect the big countries to follow model like Maldives. I'll come back to you, Madam, but let me go to Nilanjan. Nilanjan, is very interesting to note from two smaller countries from the region, two things. We are talking about money to start with, but now let's go to the mindset. Money is an issue, but mindset, I think, is the bigger issue. Bangladesh, Professor Ahmad said, and also the Honorable Minister from Maldives said, that they have an integration of the ministries to work on the environmental issues. But even in our country, the environmental department's right wing doesn't know what's happening in the left wing. And as she said, that the whole issue of the hard infrastructure also having an adaptation angle. So how you see, it's not about money, Nilanjan, it's also about mindset. What's your take on that?
It's absolutely about mindset. First of all, there is no acknowledgement in here that climate change is a developmental problem.
Despite the fact that India is one of the hugely impacted, highest impacted climate change countries in the world.
Exactly. Climate change is not an environmental problem. Climate change is a developmental problem. It affects the environment, and again, it creates a dent on development in the medium and the long run. So eventually, just as Madam Minister rightly mentioned, Professor Qazi also mentioned, in fact, this is very critical, that mainstreaming climate change in the developmental paradigm as such. It's not a concern of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. Why should it be a concern of the Ministry of Environment and Forests? This is as much of a concern of Ministry of Commerce. It is as much of a concern of Ministry of Finance. It is as much of a concern for the Ministry of Roads and Infrastructure. So the issue in here is that we are essentially divorcing climate change from development. It is as if that this entire concern of environment is divorced from development, but that is not the case. Essentially, development and environment, they go hand in hand. The critical developmental forces are causing these issues of climate change, and eventually they have to combat it through some modes of adaptation and mitigation, which we have been discussed many a time.
Nilanjan, you are saying that the ministries, other ministries, should also be concerned about climate change or environment. But what we see, what we see, other ministries are pushing the environment ministries to clear the project, hundreds of them in one day. So this other around, actually.
This is an issue of fragmented governance, fragmented development governance. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. Let's bring Anumita here. Anumita, just taking a cue from what Madam Minister said and Nilanjan reiterated, is that, see, we are having the huge infrastructure kind of push this year. I understand that post-COVID, we need to put money into that so that employment is generated, the economy comes back. That's fine. But my concern is that while doing that infrastructure spree, aren't we going to compromise with the environmental safeguards? You only mentioned in the initiation that the environmental safeguards, for example, the Green Bench, the National Green Tribunal, it started all over the country, but now reduced to only Delhi. So basically, these are all being diluted. So if you just join the dots, Anumita, we are not for a happy time. What's your take?
Absolutely. So this whole push for road building, I mean, that's what we see as a major thrust and infrastructure overall. So clearly we know that that's going to create huge pressure for clearing forests, for cutting trees, getting into ecological sensitive areas. And we are again going to get caught in that battle of ecology versus development, which is a very wrong way of looking at it. So if we have to take infrastructure approach, it is important to then understand that what should be the infrastructure design that will not lock in carbon, but unlock, and in fact not give you more sustainable solutions. That should have been the idea. So from that perspective, the question that you were asking first, whether it's a question of money or mindset. Now, this is also, it's very interesting. It's always not just about whether you have allocated enough money for environment or not. Mm-hmm. There are also a whole range of distortions in our fiscal policy, which also works against the environment. Now, for instance, today, you take the whole debate on coal. So at one level, you have lowered the safeguard on environmental safeguard on coal, you allowed commercialization of coal, and we are all fearing the whole influx of cheap coal in the industrial sector today. But when we are trying to push for clean energy transition in the industrial sector, what we are up against is that clean fuel is more expensive than coal. That is, natural gas is more expensive than coal. So industrial use of natural gas is getting limited. Just because of this one distortion that coal is under GST and therefore low tax, and natural gas is outside GST, and state governments can liberally impose their own local taxes on natural gas. And because of this, we are seeing huge distortion and we are not being able to replace coal with cleaner fuels. Mm-hmm. Similarly, we tax the bus higher than the car. Mm-hmm. Okay? I mean, so all this...
So whole mindset, as you said, mindset.
At the same time, this budget very categorically, there's a line saying that the budget is going to promote control of construction and demolition waste. Damn, yes. Very good. But one of the critical strategy of C&D waste is to recycle the C&D and bring that recycled product back into construction. Exactly. But we know that under GST, the recycled C&D product is taxed higher than the standard material. So therefore, you need an absolute cleaning up of the fiscal regime.
Absolutely, I think
the polluter pay principle.
We are patting the wrong shoulders. We are patting the wrong shoulders. Nilanjan, are you trying to say, adding anything very quickly before I go up?
Just to what Mr. RoyChowdhury mentioned, this is extremely critical. I just wanted to stress on the same lines. In fact, particularly when the FM emphasized the need for the professionally managed development financial institutions, which is supposed to act as some kind of a provider, enabler, and catalyst for infrastructure financing. And there is supposedly a bill to set up this DFI with a provision of, I presume, around 20,000 crore INR to capitalize the institution. Now, as a geostrategic move, this can be a great move because this financing agency can actually even fund projects outside India, maybe in Myanmar or any other place, just like the AIIB is doing for China. However, the issue is that whether like other global DFIs, development financial institutions, it is important that such infrastructure lending agencies, they should keep in their ambit the concern of sustainability. As Rachel mentioned, that often infrastructure projects infringe into the working of the natural ecosystem, like linear infrastructure, like roads running through the protected areas, and eventually the society pays in the long run through the losses in the ecosystem.
I remember about 15 years back, West Bengal in the eastern part of India, from where I and Nilanjan are part of, and Anumita was actually part of at one point of time. a huge amount came from World Bank for improvement of tramways. Kolkata is the only city in India which is having the continuous tramways. Now that's a different story. But what I'm trying to say here, that I was doing a kind of a research story on that, and I find that 99% of the funds which came for tramways was actually invested for building houses for the tram company. Nothing for the tramways per se, nothing for the line, nothing for the track, nothing for the overhead, mainly for building up good houses where the officials can have lovely offices and like that. So that's the way I think when you're talking about sustainability, those things are coming up. Let's go to Bangladesh, and then the answer that remained incomplete last time. I really would like to know adequately on that. Professor Ahmed, Bangladesh is on course for a financial jump. We all are reading about how Bangladesh is improving financially, and within few years you are going to go to the next pedestal. Now, my only question to you, that in this hurry to reach that level, both the infrastructure boom coupled with the privatization, you were mentioning about privatization. What's your expectation? Are you taking enough safeguards on that line to save environment and climate change? Professor Ahmed.
I didn't say privatization, it was prioritization. You know, which one you do first and which one you do
so prioritization. Okay. Anyway.
That was what I was talking about. Of course, there is a cost. When you develop, environment is going to be affected, and it is affected here. We have pollution, water pollution, air pollution, and all of those, and also cutting of trees, forestry, and even cutting of the hills as well. That is happening. So that's the cost there. But we are mindful because we have the policies, right policy. And also there is a committee set up in the Prime Minister's office. Prime Minister is very keen on sustainable development, which includes environmental protection and enhancement both. So there is a committee there. They prepared the roadmap for implementing SDG, where climate change and environment feature very prominently. They identified the priority areas, and on the SDG, not the other thing, on the SDG, which are the targets that are more relevant for Bangladesh. They identified those, and climate is there. 8 5-year plan also has. But now the coordination, I was talking about 25 ministries involved in it, and they are all they have all monies, and they have their units as well. In all the ministries, there is the environment and climate change unit. In all, it's small though. The larger coordination, there, I think there is a problem. When one ministry is doing something from their own budget, not the climate budget, from their own budget, they don't take into account that some of the ministries might be involved, and they may be damaging something which they should not have done. So these are the issues. I think the coordination issue is one, prioritization issue is another. Money on the amount is quite large. It's about 4 billion, or maybe even more. But we need much more. Even during the COVID time, we had Amphan cyclone, and we had 3 consecutive floods. And every year we have, and many people are affected. We build infrastructure, and then one cyclone, it goes away. It's going. Every year, almost one part of the country or the other is affected. And therefore, this money, in the context of the need, is not that much.
Exactly.
So here there is a problem, and here the international financing comes into the picture, and not much is available. Now, one other thing I should correct also, the funding that we have for climate is not 7.5%. Some newspapers, it's actually 4.3%. 3 billion is 4.3%.
Okay, the document that I received mentioned 7.5%.
No, that's not correct. I saw that.
So how much? 4.3%. Okay, 4.3%. Okay.
It is 3 billion out of 67 billion.
Okay. In fact, as Professor Ahmed, you were pointing out that you need more. Definitely, you need more because
obviously,
because if you look at the recent German Watch report, which talks about the long-term vulnerability and the cost of climate change, Bangladesh happens to be one of the top 5. So definitely Bangladesh needs a lot of more funds, but you are already having some funds and you are working very well with the ministries involved. But one supplementary question, there are questions being raised about your Rampal and other issues. How you juggle that? That's a very critical, when you talk about on side, the adaptation, climate, and you having Rampal, how you juggle that?
Question is, Rampal is very close to Sundarbans. That's the critical question.
That's the point.
We don't emit much. We emit per capita less than 1/3 of a ton of carbon per year, which is 1/7 of the average of developing countries and 1/13 of the average global average. So we don't emit much. The main problem is Sundarbans. There are arguments on both sides. Those who prepared projects, they argue one way, and others argue that it is going to impact on the Sundarbans, which has protected us from Amphan. From every year it protects.
Exactly.
So that we need that. Yeah, that's a question that is being discussed here. And also now it may not happen because coal is going to be not available.
So not by design, but by default.
So that by default probably it won't
by
happen.
Default perhaps.
Yeah.
Finger crossed it. Great.
But we have. I'm the coordinator of the BCCS,
okay.
The Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan we are preparing. So we have an overview. That's what I'm trying to say. We have an overview what we need to do, and we need the money that is the government can provide. It provides. There's very specific money that are provided to the trust fund also. So I'm also a member of the trust fund. So we allocate very specific for very specific actions.
I believe there's also a committee being formed, including NGOs, independent experts, to look after the climate funding. So that committee has been formed?
That was a suggestion by civil society.
Oh, not really on ground. No. Okay, I'll come back to you.
In all the committees government sets up, there are one or two or three representatives from civil society.
Okay.
And that's how I sit on several committees, actually.
I'll take your point on the Glasgow. That's the final question. But before that, let me go over to, again, Maldives. Madam Minister, you have heard how the other countries in the region are working. And as you said, that your government, the new government has been working, kind of considering environment is a premier thing. Now, but at the same time, you are having issues with the kind of infrastructure. So how do you plan to go ahead? Because you have limited resources and other limitations. So how will you try to prioritize the issues like environment, climate change in the overall political paradigm in your country?
So first of all, our whole government vision has been detailed out in a strategic action plan of the Maldivian of the president's office. And but however, like because of COVID, we have to of course take stock of our priorities and really try to focus on on rebuilding our economy and ensuring that while we do it, we also do it in an environmental and sustainable way. So that exercise has been done, and now we have a national recovery and resilience framework in which we have again further prioritized our projects. And in it, one of the main pledges and also one of the main goal of the government is ensuring that we have the safe infrastructure on islands with regards to water. So water and sanitation is.
I saw a lot of funding in the housing sector. A lot of funding in the housing infrastructure. So a lot of funding is there.
Infrastructure. So there's the housing. There's also water and infrastructure, which is a really big thing. Then we have a transport network, and we have some big infrastructure projects. So now our challenge would be to ensure that these infrastructure projects have the right environmental safeguards and that all our projects ensure minimal damage to the environment. of course, this is very, very difficult, considering that it's a challenge to us, because of course we are relying entirely on our coral reef system here, and this is our everything, our base of life. Basically, for fishing and tourism sector, we need to ensure that our coral reefs.
Madam, just a kind of a quick question: that are you getting adequate support from the international institutions like Green Climate Fund or Global Adaptation Fund? Are you getting funds? Are you getting supports?
No, I don't.
Not really?
I don't think. It's I think, of course, we are very grateful and happy for the support we get, but I don't think that this is enough. For example, I could say that our Green Climate Fund, we have developed a pipeline for $500 million. And so what we'll need is from our partners to turn these funding proposals into access for GCF and other funds. And also in part of the disaster management and loss and damage aspect, I would also like to highlight, for example, coastal erosion. Addressing coastal erosion in the Maldives would cost up to $8.8 billion US, which is a very significant amount for us. In fact, that is 4 times our entire approved national budget. And so we have this big hurdle in accessing the finance. And one thing that I would really like to highlight is that we need the procedures to access donor support are very, very complex, and we have severe capacity constraints in national institutions. So we are unable to afford the paperwork required to complete project proposals, and in doing and having everything in acceptable standard to the funds. And because our academia is not yet developed enough for us to provide, local level scientific data and other information.
Other things. Absolutely. I'll come back to a final question about the Glasgow. I'll be requiring a one-line answer. But before that, let's have a quick round, and I think the final round. Let's start with Nilanjan. Nilanjan, this budget, Indian budget, has 30 crores for the climate action plan. And I know for sure, West Bengal government's climate action plan, the budget they prepared is a 36,000 crore. So it's hilarious, it's ridiculous. So with Glasgow coming up, we have certain commitments out there. And with this ambition to be taken up all over the world, including India, how do you see that this going up in the international level? Are we kind of just chalk and cheese to me at this point of time? Nilanjan, quickly, we have just about 7-8 minutes.
Definitely, figures don't add up. They don't reflect on as far as the commitments are concerned. No doubt about that. So this is something that I already mentioned. It doesn't make any sense. 30 crores, that's ridiculous. But yes, we have to move ahead. This is as in fact Mr. RoyChowdhury mentioned, that this is a post-lockdown kind of a budget where you have to revive the economy. But yes, one very critical element was the green recovery, the green revival. That's what we needed. And in some way or the other, of course, one very critical element was the green. Why essentially we use the term green revival or the green recovery was that the zoonosis element, especially the biological control of the ecosystem, so that doesn't get disturbed. But at the same time, we simply cannot ignore this international commitment. This has essentially catapulted the economy years back. If this is where we are, so by all means, we have to plug in. I don't know. I'm not bothered about what our international commitments are. Let us look at what our commitments are to our own humanity. So climate change, by all means, have to be integrated in our development vision.
Absolutely, Nilanjan. You know, and I know about Sundarbans. In Indian Sundarbans, and Professor Ahmad knows that in Indian Sundarbans, there's about 4.5 million people who are having the kind of a poverty ratio which is double than the national average. I think similar in Bangladesh, at 7.5 million people live in the Sundarban influence zone. It's about 13 million together, which is bigger than many countries in Europe. And my only humble question to the government is, when you are taking a budget, what does 5 million people get? Are you contributing anything to the resilience? when the next Amphan will hit them, or will they be in a better position to combat? I'm afraid the answer is not yes as for now. So that's where the question mark arises. Anumita, very quickly, with the international commitments and everything, how you perceive this is the trend to continue? Very quickly.
So very
clearly, in the air pollution sector.
No, so very clearly, Jayanta, keeping the international commitment in mind, so far we have been complacent because our overall NDC commitments, we are saying we have almost met it.
Exactly.
That's also because our ambition is certainly not as high. But now there's going to be pressure for enhanced ambition, enhanced NDC, right? Now that's the preparedness that we require. So very quickly, the message for us is that we now need some fiscal maturity, keeping in mind that only command and control is a very archaic way of dealing with environmental impacts. We need to give fiscal signals. And Madam Minister who is here, I was so impressed a few years ago when I saw that in Maldives, for your vehicle import policy, you have emission-based taxation, that you had earlier. I mean, something that we haven't even started doing in India, only
exactly.
We have a little bit of that. So it's clearly what I'm saying, that our fiscal regime now has to account for the cost of environment and also the benefit of taking, taking an ambitious action. That's how other air quality regulators around the world, they work. So they account for the cost, but they also account for the benefit to justify the cost. So let's have a new fiscal regime to tax the bad and fund the good.
And also, Anumita, I feel that we need some continuity and consistency in our policy. When you are doing the air pollution thing or in the climate thing, you just can't have a reasonable budget in 1 year, then slides down, because whatever you are investing all goes to naught. I'm not an economist, but as a common sense person, I understand that this really doesn't work, even in economics. I think Professor Ahmad and Nilanjan can definitely will agree with me that this kind of funding is...
Right.
With election coming up, you are suddenly funding, and with the COVID coming up, you are funding 137% excess on health, and you have to wait for a climate disaster to fund 150%. So are you bolting the horse in the right time is the question to be asked. I think I'm not sure about it. Professor Ahmed, on Bangladesh point of view, we know that in Bangladesh, the climate is a very, very big issue. And with Glasgow coming up, how you see, you are part of various committees, you are part of the Bangladeshi strategic plan. What the Bangladesh is going to kind of do or feeling like in context to Glasgow? Your feel about it.
One of the things we go there with a new strategy and action plan.
Okay.
What we will do and what the scenario looks like and what we can do. We'll have that. But internationally, at least I believe, because I have been a negotiator for a long time, it has to be mitigation, global mitigation. If that doesn't happen, Bangladesh or any other country, even Indian coasts and other areas will be affected severely with salinization and then storm surges and all of those. So therefore, this is one of the things that we'll be highlighting that needs to be done. Now with the United States back again, probably some
additional funds will come up.
Yeah, I think that the other developed countries will get some support from there as well.
So you're hopeful. You're hopeful.
Yes.
Cautiously hopeful, perhaps.
With question mark.
With a question mark.
If you go there with great hope, then we may be frustrated. So we go with questions.
We know what happened in Copenhagen. We know what happened in various others where people go with Copenhagen and almost lost all hopes after that.
Go there prepared and hope for the best. Let's see.
Madam Minister, for Maldives, how important is Glasgow and what kind of hope and expectation with that you will be going to Glasgow?
Well, I think we have to be very hopeful because we are at this juncture where only being hopeful and planning and knowing what to ask for will get us out of this climate crisis, in my opinion. So we are hopeful, and as we have seen, the unprecedented scale of the responses and recovery packages worldwide on COVID recovery demonstrates the transformational power of ambitious actions. So we need to apply the same sort of urgency to the climate crisis as well. And I think as a first step, the Maldives has declared our intentions on raising our ambition on NDC. Of course, even if our mitigation contribution is negligible, we're treating this as not only from the mitigation aspect, but on adaptation as well. And I think that once we flesh out an implementation plan for the NDCs, we should be able to prioritize and see where we need the funds. So we hope that by the time we go to Glasgow, we could be more clear on what exactly we need. Yes. And also we like to push for SIDS getting more funds from MDBs. For example, SIDS receive only 4% of climate finance provided by the NDBs for adaptation, and only 7% in 2019. So this is very, very small.
Great.
And if you take from
great, we have to wrap up now. We have to wrap up right now. I thank you for all the information, but I completely share your hope, because I think without hope, you just can't go anywhere. With, as Professor Ahmad pointed out, US back in the game. I hope they are back in the game. They are back, but whether they are back in the game or not, that's a different story to understand. But if they are back in the game, and so, and it's from to me, apart from knowing the independent and individual scenarios across South Asia, from Maldives to Bangladesh to India, what's interesting is the learning lesson from Nilanjan to Anumita, I think Bangladesh to India. What's interesting is the Maldives is giving an environment. And the kind of modus operandi that Dr. Ahmed was talking about, the 25 ministries working together on environmental issues, not an independent ministry like India. Nilanjan, I think a lot to learn. I think this platform has been created, this South Asian environment dialogue being created, the exchange of views. I think is the Maldives giving an environment. I think we have all learned kind of this modus operandi working with Ahmed was talking about the 25. And I'm sure that they can also learn together on environmental issues from India, how an independent ministry like India is doing. Another day, another time. I think this platform has been created. This South Asian environment for your time. We'll keep in touch. Thank you, everybody. We conclude here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Dialogue has been created to exchange views. I think no better than today. I think we have all learned how these countries are working with that and how India can learn that. And I'm sure that they can also learn a thing or two from India, how India is going about. Welcome to South Asian Environment Dialogue. Another day, another time. Today with this, I think a fascinating discussion. And thanks to all of you for your time. We'll keep in touch. Thank you, everybody. We conclude here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
replenished for the next harvest. To recover from this crisis, the world depends on us. We secure tomorrow's food by fertilizing crops today. To keep things growing, you can count on us. To learn more, visit us at fertilizercanada.ca/COVID-19.